Hi everyone, welcome to our 50th episode of Brattleboro's Town Matters podcast. This podcast is a brief update on what's happening in Brattleboro town government. I'm your host, Town Manager John Potter, broadcasting from the Hannah Cosman Meeting Room in Brattleboro, Vermont. Today I will give you an update on the Selectboard's last two meetings held on Tuesday, July 8th, and they snuck one in on Tuesday, July 15th, a special meeting as well. Then I'll talk about the agenda for the Selectboard's next regular meeting, which will be on Tuesday, July 22nd. Also, I'll go over a few announcements before wrapping up. So the meeting of Tuesday, July 8th, we started out with 11 items on the consent agenda. There was a certification of compliance with VTrans on road standards. There was also an annual financial plan for VTrans on paving in town with VTrans funding. There was the award of a $122,176 bid for street paving on Greenleaf Street. There was ratification of a parade permit for St. Michael's Church. There was the awarding of several bids for equipment in the Department of Public Works, a dump truck, a tractor, highway tractor number 63. I didn't note how much the dump truck went for, but the tractor was a $151,167 bid that was awarded. There was also an excavator for the utility division, and that was a $107,400 purchase. And then there was also a bid awarded for 2025 line striping around town and a $476,832 award for a project at William Street to repair that retaining wall that has been collapsing down into the whetstone. Also on consent were 4 business personal property tax liens that were approved. And finally, a second-class liquor license, tobacco license, and tobacco substitute permit for Yazzy's Market. And so all of those items got approved on consent by a vote of 5-0. Under regular business, the board first discussed the charter revision process, and members of the Charter Revision Commission and Town Attorney Bob Fisher and Hannah Clarice joined the meeting, and they discussed a memo from the Charter Commission to the Select Board, which was asking for 2 questions to be on the ballot in November. This is all preliminary discussion, and no motion was needed or taken on this item. So they're kind of just talking this all through, like what is the process moving forward, sort of the end game for the Charter Revision Commission. And so they talked about ballot options, they talked about representative town meeting, and then also members of the public brought up the idea of Australian ballot as a way to make decisions in town. And there was further discussion on all of those items in depth, so check into that video if you're interested in hearing where the Charter Commission is with the Select Board. The next item was an update on the Hinsdale Bridges issue. So the Brattleboro Select Board had requested of the Hinsdale Select Board that they sign on to a joint letter about the bridges that the 2 Select Boards could send to the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. But the Hinsdale Select Board had looked at that letter and they decided they want to go a different direction. And Town Administrator Catherine Lynch and Hinsdale Police Chief Melissa Evans came to the meeting of the Brattleboro Board to discuss public safety and trash issues that they're seeing in the area. You know, they talked about how the Hinsdale Select Board would like to try to demolish the bridges, and they asked the town of Brattleboro to either buy the bridges or support them in removing them. And there was quite a bit of discussion from the Brattleboro Select Board about this. They heard input from the public, and there was a motion that Brattleboro affirm as its official position that the Charles Dana and Anna Hunt Marsh bridges be restored and kept open for pedestrian and bicycle access as described in the Hinsdale Bridge Project Plan, grant application, and interstate agreements. The board also moved to direct the town manager and staff to advocate for that position with the town of Hinsdale, the New Hampshire Department Department of Transportation, and any other relevant entities to advocate for continued pedestrian and bicycle access across both bridges and to reopen discussions with the Hinsdale Selectboard about a mutually satisfactory resolution to the Hinsdale Bridge project. And that motion passed by a vote of 3 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstained. The next item was the FY26 property tax rate, and this is essentially the result of the special representative town meeting in May and also the information from the state about the education tax. Overall, the property tax rate for fiscal year 26 will be increasing over fiscal year 25 by 2.7%. That's inclusive of the education taxes. The smaller portion of that tax is the municipal portion, which is going up by 8.9%. So there was a motion to approve a municipal tax rate of 1.5835 per $100 of assessed valuation, and to ratify the state mandated education rates of 1.8991 per 100 of assessed valuation for homestead properties and 1.7539 per 100 of assessed valuation for non-residential properties. And that motion passed by a board vote of 5-0. Following that, Department of Public Works Director Dan Tyler gave a presentation on ordinance changes to Chapter 18 on the water and sewer. That was a first reading, and they talked about rates and the structure of the ordinance, and no motion was taken. There'll be a second reading of that coming up soon. Then the board took up the issue of downtown restrooms and a police substation bid. And Assistant DPW Director Pete Lynch and Assistant Police Chief Jeremy Evans joined the meeting with Project Coordinator Steve Horton. They discussed the value engineering that's been done on this project at the Brattleboro Transportation Center, including work they've done on the HVAC system, on the number of restrooms available, and other ways that they found savings in the initial bid. There was discussion by the board of a preliminary motion, which led to a final motion to award the general construction bid of the Transportation Center public bathrooms and police substation renovation project to All Seasons Construction Corp. in the amount not to exceed $555,000 after value engineering the removal of exterior access public restrooms, but keeping the interior one. And that passed by a board vote of 3 in favor and 2 opposed. Next, the board was looking at the time, and they decided to postpone a topic on their agenda of the monthly FY25 budget update for May, and that was moved to their July 22nd meeting. The final issue for the evening was emergency management for heat, and Recreation and Parks Director Carol Lalott and Fire Chief Jay Simons joined the meeting and discussed heat advisory protocols and cooling centers, and they discussed the pool and the many ways that people can get free or low-cost pool vouchers if they need them. There was a discussion about that and feedback from the public, but no motion was required or made on this item, and that closed out the meeting for Tuesday, July 8th. The board called a special meeting for Tuesday, July 15th. This was an urgent matter that came to the town's attention late in the week prior, and that was that there was a Tri-Park Community Development Block Grant which got offered to the town, and the board needed to consider whether to accept that or not. This was a Community Development Block Grant to help a project to move 19 of the homes at the Mountain Park section of Tri-Park to safer grounds to get them outside of the high hazard flood zone. And so the board moved to adopt the grant agreement resolution and accept and appropriate the sum of $450,000 from the Vermont Community Development Program for the 2022 implementation grant in support of the Tri-Park Cooperative Housing Corporation's infill development and relocation of homeowners affected by multiple flooding events project, and to authorize the town manager to execute the grant agreement with the state of Vermont and all other associated documents necessary for the performance of the grant-funded activities. And that motion passed by a board vote of 5-0, and that was the only item that the board took up on July 15th before they adjourned. The next Select Board meeting is a regularly scheduled meeting for Tuesday, July 22nd at 6:15 p.m. in the Select Board meeting room at 230 Main Street, and this is what will be on the agenda for that meeting. After preliminary agenda items, there will be a consent agenda with 7 items on it. A first and third class liquor license for Sage's Pub, which I think is on Flat Street. A first class liquor license for the Brattleboro Inn on Putney Road. Then also on the consent agenda are several more public works capital equipment purchases. One is a flushing machine, Highway 131, which is a $115,478 purchase. A $126,185 purchase of Highway number 18, which is a backhoe loader, and then purchase of 3 utility trucks, 102, 108, and 111, for a total amount of $116,704. And then the final 2 items on the consent agenda are grant related. One is accepting an opioid settlement funding grant of $32,157 for a treatment program through the fire department. And the final item is ratification of the application of a $20,473 grant to the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. Then in regular business for July 22nd, first off, the board will be hearing a presentation from Green Mountain Power on a project that they are planning to do at Ames Hill, and that will be followed by consideration of an open meeting permit for the Street Food Festival, which would be held at the Brattleboro Common. Then the Public Works staff will return with the second reading of the utility rate ordinance and a possible rate schedule for adoption for this fiscal year. The next item is titled 2025 Tax Year Contributions, and this is a continuation of a discussion. I think it came up at Representative Town Meeting or maybe during the budget discussions with the Select Board, where there are a number of properties in town that do not pay property taxes on their parcels for various reasons, mostly having to do with exemptions either through the state or as approved at town meeting. And so this item will be to talk about whether the board would like to request a donation, some sort of payments in lieu of taxes from these property owners. Following that, the postponed FY25 May budget report is on the agenda, and there'll be discussion about that. There will be some supplemental information in the packet for the Select Board from some additional information that was requested at the last meeting on that. Then the planning staff will give a presentation on some follow-up housekeeping around the vacant building ordinance, which has now gone into effect, and they will be requesting appointment of a building safety officer and the adoption of fees around vacant buildings. Then following that, the emergency management staff from the town will present about the local emergency management plan for this year, and there will be discussion on that and possible adoption by the board. Then there is just one more item on the agenda for the 22nd, and that is the fire department's quarterly report, where town fire department staff give a presentation on the last quarter of fiscal 25, and we'll hear about how things are going in the fire department. And that's the meeting of July 22nd. I have a couple of announcements. First, following the success of last year's summer block party at the Common, the Brattleboro Police Department and partners will be bringing back the celebration this year. So join the Brattleboro Police Department during Community Connection Night, which is scheduled for August 6th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Harmony parking lot and along Elliott Street. So they're moving their venue this year. This is a family event that will feature free food served by the Brattleboro Fire Department, free ice cream for all kids in attendance, a bounce house, a dunk tank where you can dunk your favorite police officer, a touch-a-truck area, lots of games, music, a mini petting zoo, and much more. So if you have kids and looking for something to do on August 6th, that sounds like a great option. The second announcement is that the Vermont Covered Bridge Society is planning a special evening event at the Creamery Covered Bridge during Covered Bridge Week on Thursday, August 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. Come down to the Covered Bridge at 500 Western Ave for a unique opportunity to view covered bridges of southern Windham County, Vermont, which is a 30-minute film by Philip Gattenby, and that will be shown on a continuous loop, so go check that out. Attendees are encouraged to bring their own chairs, and as a special treat, more free ice cream will be provided, which was donated by the Brattleboro Parks and Recreation Department and the Brattleboro Elks Club, and that will be served by Brattleboro Garden Club. So don't miss this chance to celebrate Vermont's covered bridge heritage here in Brattleboro. So that's a recap of what's happening in town government in Brattleboro. Please reach out to me at the town manager's office or townmanager@brattleboro.gov if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to hear on the podcast, or if you want to discuss anything further. There's lots of additional information on the town website, brattleboro.gov, about what's discussed at the select board meeting, so please check in there for agendas, reports, and lots of detail in the backup materials. Thanks for listening, and check in again soon.